In this lesson, I'm going to briefly cover what NOT gateways versus NOT instances are. Now, we've talked before about network address translation or NOT and how it is used to translate addresses between public and private IP address ranges. So, NOT gateways and NOT instances are used for one purpose only, and that purpose is to allow instances that we implement on private subnets to connect to the internet. Now, keep in mind that it is only for outbound. It doesn't mean that there will be bidirectional traffic. If we wanted that, we would simply deploy our instances on a public subnet. They would have a public IP and use an internet gateway. But sometimes we want private instances. It's also possible that those private instances, they might want to connect to an outbound service, a service located on the internet, or they might want to download software updates, that sort of thing. So, let's see how this works visually. Again, we have an availability zone with a public subnet and a private subnet, and we have deployed an EC2 instance on a private subnet, and it has a private IP address. There is an internet gateway attached to the VPC. What we could do then is, we can implement a NOT gateway on a public subnet. Now, it is important to understand that this NOT gateway is on a public subnet because it needs an IP address. It will have maybe an elastic IP address assigned to it, and it will use that to be able to talk to the internet gateway on behalf of our private instance. So remember this for exam questions. A lot of questions come up regarding this type of scenario. Always deploy your NOT gateways or your NOT instances on public subnets. So, we have our routing tables. As you may know, the routing table for the public subnet has a route to the internet gateway, but also we have a private routing table. And in this case, we've added an entry for the NOT gateway ID that we've implemented here. And just like with the internet gateway entry here, it's any destination. With this configuration, our EC2 instance can now use its private IP address to connect to the NOT gateway's private IP address, and then traffic can be forwarded to the internet gateway using network address translation. And from there, it would go to the internet to whatever service you want to connect to. So, this is a NOT gateway. It's an AWS service that you can deploy. Then we have NOT instances. These are much less popular. We used to use them long before NOT gateways came along. A NOT instances is not an AWS service. It's just an EC2 instance that you configure in a certain way. The deployment topology is very similar. We have our instance on a private subnet, our internet gateway, and our NOT instances. When we deploy in NOT instances, we use a special AMI that's already pre-configured in a certain way, and that will have a string like this, Amazon AMI VPC NOT. So, you can look for this when you're looking for an AMI, and it should bring up some entries. The really important thing you need to do is disable the source and destination checks. This is the key that comes up in the exam questions. Now, NOT instances are no longer covered as much in the exam as NOT gateways. For most use cases, you will always choose a NOT gateway. If it comes up, sometimes it's just because AWS is checking your knowledge of a NOT instance. And NOT instance requires source and destination checks to be disabled. That's why I did this class on NOT gateway versus NOT instance, so you learn how to differentiate one from the other. So, source and destination checks is essentially a configuration that allows the NOT gateway to function as a network address translator, receive traffic on one IP address, and then translate it and send it using a different one. Our route in the tables is configured in almost the same way as with a NOT gateway, but instead, we're just going to specify the NOT instance ID. And then, as before, we are connecting using a private IP to the NOT instance using the VPC router, and then we connect to the outside world using the NOT instance's elastic IP. So, if I go to my browser, I tell it launch instance. Search for more AMI. In Community AMI, I type NOT. We can see several entries like Amazon AMI VPC NOT, This indicates that this is a special army with the functionality of a NAT instance. And once the instance has been launched, we select it, Actions, Networks, and then Change Source and Destination Check, and this is where we check that box to disable this check that I mentioned. So, that was all I wanted to share regarding NAT gateway versus NAT instances.